Everything begins with our protagonist, Taechai, who was calmly walking alongside his childhood friend, Rin. Since they were young, the two had always been very close, and at that moment they were talking normally about school, commenting on which classes they intended to focus on and which sports activities they would choose in the future. As the conversation continued, Taechai ends up being interrupted when he hears something strange. An unknown voice suddenly calls out to him, making him turn his face to try to identify where that sound was coming from. At that instant, he notices someone approaching quickly, coming straight toward them on a bicycle. Meanwhile, in a completely different world, a princess was finishing a magic circle with the objective of performing a summoning. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but before the ritual could be completed, something unexpected happens. Her companion is thrown to the ground after receiving an extremely violent blow, becoming gravely injured. Immediately afterward, a hooded man appears at the site, warning that he would not allow that to continue and stating that he would spill blood to prevent the rune from functioning properly. A few seconds later, as he prepared to eliminate the princess, a guard who was on the brink of death gathers his last strength and runs the attacker through with his sword, desperately begging the princess to flee from there. At that exact moment, the rune reacts once again, lighting up intensely. Taechai becomes completely confused after nearly being hit by the man on the bicycle, but he notices something strange beneath his feet. He feels an unusual sensation as he notices a glowing rune on the ground, following his movements. Worried, he asks Rin to move away, since that light seemed to be reacting only to him, trying to protect her. Taechai pushes her out of the magic circle. However, Rin refuses to abandon him. Instead, she runs back and hugs him tightly, determined not to leave him alone. In just a few moments, both are enveloped by that intense magical energy. Sometime later, the situation becomes even stranger. Taechai awakens and notices Rin unconscious beside him, immediately trying to wake her. After some time, they begin to walk around the area, trying to find a cell phone signal, but without success. Confused, they question where they could be. Taechai comments that perhaps they are no longer in their own world, since that light looked very much like something seen in RPG games. Despite finding the idea absurd, they soon become frightened when they come across a gigantic creature. At that moment, Taechai realizes that the creature resembles a horse, but with a huge horn in the center of its head and completely red eyes, conveying a terrifying aggressiveness. He quickly understands that the monster is about to attack. The two start running, barely managing to escape a brutal attack, which gives Taechai an idea. He asks Rin to run as fast as possible and hide, while he would draw the monster's attention to protect her. However, Rin reacts by saying that maybe he really should die, since that creature was extremely dangerous. Even so, Taechai acts according to what he already felt deep in his heart. His friend was in danger, and he would be willing to give his own life if necessary. He begins to shout, drawing the monster's attention. The creature hurls a huge stone, but Taechai manages to endure it by a narrow margin. The horse then begins a violent charge against him. But before the attack could hit him, a voice chants a spell. A blade of wind appears, striking the monster with precision. A man runs toward the creature and delivers another blow with his sword, but the monster withstands it and begins to spit fire. Suddenly, an arrow is fired from the bushes, embedding itself in the creature's body and leaving it motionless on the ground. The archer then explains that obsidian horses are extremely resilient. Taechai understands almost nothing of that, and then a swordsman comments that those monsters are among the most dangerous in the region, as they frequently attack people and are carnivorous. A girl from the group adds that, despite that, they are also quite valuable, stating that she would take care of the rest. Shortly afterward, she uses fire magic to completely incinerate the monster's body. The adventurers begin to discuss who should lead the group and organize the situation. Taechai observes everything from a distance and realizes that they truly are in a world very similar to an RPG. There is magic, monsters, and many things he only knew from games. Even so, he understands that this is not a game, but a real world where they now have to live. Regardless of how they arrived there, he decides that surviving at any cost is the priority. A few hours later, everyone sets up camp. Rakwal, the leader of the group, asks where Taechai and Rin are from, since she did not recognize those clothes nor the creatures they mentioned. Taechai looks at Rin seeking support, but she completely ignores him, clearly irritated. Not knowing what to answer, Taechai remains silent. Raquel notices the tension and explains that it is not safe to walk through that region without protection, as there are many monsters that attack carriages on the way to the city. She comments that this is part of their work as adventurers, something that Mei, one of the members, confirms. Taechai apologizes for asking so many questions and asks if they could take them to the city. Raquel agrees, saying that they would not leave defenseless people behind. She also recommends that Taechai reconcile with Rin, as there seemed to be something wrong between them. Later, Taechai decides to talk to Rin, asking why she was so upset. The girl tries to deny it, but he reminds her that he has known her since childhood and can tell when something is wrong. Rin then explodes, saying that he should not play the hero and risk his own life like that. Taechai finally understands that her fear was being left alone. He promises that he will not do that again, and that, from that moment on, they would always stay together. Both understand that they are in an unknown place and that they can only rely on each other. The next day, after traveling with the adventurers, they arrive at the city. The group points out the main streets and the location of the guild. Despite the surprise, Taechai and Rin state that they wish to become adventurers, as they need money, and this seems to be the best option. They promise to act with caution and avoid unnecessary risks. Raquel understands and recommends a nearby inn, in addition to giving them some money so they can support themselves during the first few days and buy basic equipment. Grateful, Taechai and Rin head to the Adventurers Guild, where the receptionist, Mary, notices that they are new. They inform her that they wish to register, and she presents the contract with all the rules and agreements. Surprised, the two realize that they are able to read everything perfectly. They wonder what exactly that book says, since the writing seems strange at first glance. Even so, they realize that they can understand everything flawlessly. This makes them remember that they have also been able to communicate without difficulty with the people of that world ever since they arrived. While they reflect on this, the receptionist explains that it will still be necessary to carry out a test to identify the type of magic each of them has, because the guild does not accept adventurers who do not possess magical affinity. She adds that the procedure is quite simple, despite appearing complicated at first glance, since all that is required is to place a hand on a crystal sphere. She asks Rin to be the first to take the test. The girl, visibly nervous, complies and places her hand on the sphere. After a few seconds, nothing happens, which clearly leaves her disappointed. However, soon afterward, small lights of different colors appear briefly inside the crystal. This surprises Mary, who shows a certain apprehension as she observes the phenomenon. Next, she asks the protagonist to also place his hand on the sphere. The moment he does so, the crystal simply shatters, leaving the receptionist even more shocked. Unable to believe what she has just witnessed, she asks them to wait a moment, stating that she will return shortly. Meanwhile, some nearby adventurers begin to whisper, curious about what happened. A few moments later, the guild leader appears. His name is Gerard, and he is accompanied by Miura, who is recognized by some adventurers as the famous Golden Flame Sword. Gerard addresses the protagonist and Rin, explaining that, unfortunately, they could not be registered at that moment. Even so, he makes it clear that this did not mean they would not be able to work in the future, only that they would need to go somewhere else before returning. The protagonist does not fully understand what that means, but Gerard thanks them for their understanding, saying that there was nothing strange about the situation and that, when the time came, everything would become clear. He also assures them that Miura is someone trustworthy. Shortly afterward, everyone leaves the guild together. Some time later, they arrive at a house, where they are received by a woman. Miura carefully observes the way she is dressed and comments that they have visitors. Soon after, everyone gathers, and the woman quickly understands what is happening. She explains to the protagonist and Rin that the guild wants her herself to conduct the tests. Next, she hands them two objects that will serve to measure both physical strength and magical power through a spell. The tables begin to glow, and letters appear in the air, displaying the results. The woman is surprised, as is Miura. The protagonist, in turn, fears that he does not possess any magical power at all, but she responds that, For the time being, both of them will be her apprentices. Meanwhile, at the palace, those responsible for the summoning informed the leader about what happened. They explained that the attempt at sabotage failed and that the summoned individuals disappeared. Even so, investigators have already been sent to various regions to locate them. The collected data indicates the level of their magical power. In the case of the protagonist, the value reaches an astonishing 120,000 magic points, while Rin has nearly 50,000. This is something extremely out of the ordinary, since a person with only 10,000 points could already aspire to become a knight or a royal mage. The very woman responsible for the tests, with 42,000 points, is considered a legend in the field of magic. She explains that this means the protagonist possesses immense power, and that, if both of them train properly and learn to control it, they could easily reach high rankings as adventurers. More than that, they would have enough potential to dominate an entire nation or destroy it, if they wished. This revelation leaves both of them completely surprised. Precisely for this reason, she states that she will personally train them so that they learn to control their abilities. For now, however, she recommends that they rest and eat well. The next day, during breakfast, the protagonist is impressed by the food. After that, Lemmy begins to explain what magic is and how it works. According to her, for a mage to cast spells, it is necessary to offer magical power to the spirits, who are responsible for manipulating the elements. In practice, it is an exchange that depends directly on the amount of magical power the mage possesses. Normally, a mage can use only one element, as this indicates that the spirits of that specific element assist them. There are exceptions, such as Miura, who can use 2 elements, or Lemmy herself, who masters up to 3. However, Rin is an even rarer case, as she demonstrates affinity with the 4 basic elements, being able to establish pacts with spirits of different natures. For this reason, Lemmy states that Rin is someone extremely special. Curious, the protagonist asks what his own elements would be, but Lemmy responds that she still does not know. This leaves him confused, so she explains that he is not a common mage, but rather a sorcerer. She clarifies that the difference is significant. While a mage offers their magical power and recites incantations so that the spirits act, a sorcerer is able to directly command those spirits as long as they have formed a pact with them. Because of this, a sorcerer could, theoretically, destroy nations on their own. However, he replies that he has no interest in politics or in causing that kind of destruction, which ends up disappointing some nations. Gradually, Lemmy explains that it is difficult to determine which element he possesses, since there are sorcerers who choose to manipulate ancient forces, such as light, darkness, or even time. As time passes, he would eventually discover his affinity. For now, the focus should be on training. After a few hours, the protagonist finds himself completely exhausted, as he cannot materialize his magical power as indicated in the tests. This leaves him frustrated, but then he hears a voice that encourages him. Believing it to be his teacher, even without being certain, he decides to continue training. Meanwhile, Rin is trained by Miura, who teaches her how to summon fire, explaining how the element is formed. Rin carefully follows the instructions and imagines the combustion process, managing to create a flame. Miura is shocked to see that she succeeded on the very first attempt. Rin comments that she could still improve, explaining that if she imagined a more intense combustion, like that of gas, the effect would be much greater. This leaves Miura completely surprised, since she had never seen blue fire before. After several hours of training, Rin meets up with the protagonist, who is extremely tired and discouraged for not having completed the task he was given. He thinks about giving up, but Rin encourages him to try one more time. At that moment, he hears that voice again, telling him that he is very close and that the power is within him. Even confused, he follows the instructions and manages to direct his magical power to his right hand, feeling the energy flow through his body. Seeing this, Rin congratulates him for finally succeeding. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks Rin if she also heard the voice of a girl. Rin, however, immediately denies it, showing some apprehension and saying that perhaps it was some kind of ghost. The protagonist replies that he does not believe in that possibility, but in the end, he decides to ignore the matter. He comments that, at the very least, they should go inside and have dinner together that night. During the meal, Lemmy congratulates Rin, explaining that Miura told her about her progress. According to her, it was something truly impressive for a beginner to master magic in such a short period of time. The protagonist takes the opportunity to ask when he himself would begin using spells, but Lemmy clarifies that, for now, that would not be possible since he had not yet discovered his element. Before that, he needed to learn how to strengthen his own body with magical power, something that would be extremely advantageous for someone who also fights physically, which only further reinforced his natural talent. She explains that he should not worry about limits for now. Until they discovered his element, he would learn hand-to-hand combat using physical enhancement. That night, Emiya was unable to sleep. Just like Miura, the two end up talking about the young ones and the extraordinary potential that both of them demonstrated. Lemmy comments that she still could not imagine exactly who they were or where they came from, but states that, for now, the most important thing was to teach them everything they needed to survive. Otherwise, when other people discovered the power they possessed, the situation could become extremely dangerous. After 3 weeks of intense training, the protagonist manages to defeat a giant wolf solely thanks to the strengthening of his body. To him, eliminating this type of monster no longer seemed so difficult. Meanwhile, Rin faces a group of monstrous horned rabbits that try to attack her, but she barely needs to move much to defeat them. At a certain moment, she casually comments that one of them was starting to bother her, eliminating several monsters at the same time. The instructors observe everything from a distance. Miura feels proud of Rin, realizing that the girl barely needed incantations to fight, in addition to already creating new spells, something surprising even for experienced adventurers. Lemmy only smiles because she knew that both of them were already close to reaching their goal and facing the final test. A short time later, the protagonist and Rin once again come face to face with an obsidian horse before them. This time, however, they are far more prepared and determined, confident that they would not be defeated as before. Later, already back at the house, Lemmy officially congratulates them, stating that both had passed the graduation exam and that they would return to the city to become true adventurers. The two are surprised to hear this, but soon remember that this had always been their intention ever since they arrived in that world. Lemmy then comments that there was still something important to explain. She says that, as they already suspected, they were lost because, occasionally, people from other worlds end up arriving in that place. Some cross through space-time fissures, while others are deliberately summoned. In their case, Lemmy strongly suspects that they were summoned by a powerful sorcerer. The protagonist is surprised to have it confirmed that they truly came from another world. But Lemmy explains that, with the enormous power both of them possess and the strange words they used at the beginning, it was not difficult to deduce. She states that the summoning certainly had a purpose, although the most complicated part would be discovering who performed it. According to her, only sorcerers specialized in space-time would be capable of using a spell of that level, and even in a magical country like that, such a person was extremely rare. Enthusiastic, the protagonist comments that this would make everything simpler. They would become adventurers, find whoever summoned them, and thus be able to return to their original world. Lemmy only smiles and says that this could be a possibility, but that, for now, they should rest and enjoy the night. Later, the protagonist talks with Rin and says that soon they would be true adventurers. That way, they could earn money, gather information, and eventually find the summoner to return home. Rin laughs, saying that he makes everything seem far too simple. Even so, the protagonist thanks Rin for having accompanied him. Even without fully understanding what was going on, he admits that, if he had come alone, he probably would not have survived. Because of that, he is deeply grateful for her company, certain that together they would become great adventurers and, one day, return to their world. Hours later, the protagonist cannot stop thinking about the fact that his power would be enough to destroy an entire nation. At that moment, he hears that mysterious voice again, telling him that very soon they would meet. He tries to ask who she is, but receives no answer. He only feels a trail of magic approaching, accompanied by a presence that seems to be watching him from a distance. A few days later, the protagonist has another dream in which that same voice once again states that they would soon recognize each other. This leaves him uneasy. making him wonder why the voice always repeated the same thing, even after they had already been in that world for weeks. During that period, they finally established themselves in the city as rank D adventurers, starting to complete simple missions to earn money and gradually adapt to their new life. A few hours later, while they are at the inn, Rin reads a book about the kingdom. Since, as adventurers, they needed to know the cities and the capital well, she discovers that there are several nearby kingdoms and that that city was close to the border. While they are distracted, one of the waitresses hands the protagonist a letter, which seems strange, even more so when he realizes that it is an urgent request for them to appear at the guild. A short time later, the protagonist and Rin arrive at the guild, confused about the reason for the summons, since they used to go there every day. Gerard then explains that there is a special mission intended exclusively for them. He provides the details and explains that it is a task in the suburbs of the city, where they should collect information by talking with merchants, waiters, and local employees. Gerard clarifies that, although it is a mission normally assigned to more experienced adventurers, they could also accept it. The objective was to investigate the theft of certain products and discover as much as possible about the person responsible. He reveals that 2 adventurers had already failed this mission, and that, if they also failed, the classification of the task would need to be raised, which demonstrated the seriousness of the situation. By trusting them as Lemmy's apprentices, Gerard believes they would have a better chance of success. He also promises that, if they solve the problem, they would be promoted to rank C. After receiving the instructions, the protagonist and Rin leave the guild, discussing the plan for the mission. Along the way, Rin gets distracted when she sees fruit stalls and runs over to buy some. The protagonist is impressed when he realizes that the fruits they used to eat cost twice as much in that world. The vendor explains that, in fact, those products were still cheap. This was happening because supplies were taking a long time to reach the city, since several companies had been suffering from shortages. There were rumors that monsters were attacking the carriages that transported goods. The protagonist reflects on this for a few moments and ends up buying the fruits. As he walks away with Rin, he comments that he feels the problem does not involve only common monsters, but may be directly linked to the mission they received. To him, someone was stealing the supplies intentionally, and because of that he tells Rin that they should gather as much information as possible. That same night, while they observe the area from hiding, they notice some men entering an establishment carrying boxes. They decide to enter as well and ask for something to drink. But the bartender says that he does not serve drinks to children. Some men present mock them, saying that they should go to sleep. The protagonist asks only for water, stating that he is not interested in alcohol. But the bartender shows distrust. Then, the protagonist casually comments that he is looking for some items and heard that that place could supply them. Even with the current shortage, he says he is willing to pay a good price, displaying a pouch full of money. Immediately, the men around them become attentive. The bartender warns that this is dangerous and that they should not get involved in that kind of matter. At that moment, the protagonist and Rin realize that the other men slowly stand up and begin to surround them, clearly intending to attack them and steal the money. With no other option, the two react. In a few seconds, they manage to knock down several of them, leaving them unconscious. They interrogate one of the men, who, terrified, claims to know nothing about robberies. According to him, he only received orders from a drunken man to transport some boxes in a carriage that had been attacked on the outskirts of the city, leaving them at the entrance of the place. The bartender reinforces that it is common for people to appear there to sell items and insists that he has no connection to any theft. He advises the two to leave before the situation gets worse. The protagonist and Rin leave the place, commenting that they did not obtain much concrete information, but both clearly feel that they are being followed since they left the tavern. Shortly after, three shadows appear in front of them. The protagonist observes carefully and realizes that they are women. One of them attacks with a spear, but he manages to dodge at the last instant. He avoids using excessive strength, because he believes that if they capture someone alive, they can obtain valuable information. Using only physical reinforcement, he throws one of the attackers against the wall. Hours later, the girl wakes up chained to a chair inside a cell. Gerard explains that she was lucky, because assassins who fail are normally executed. However, since she was captured alive, she would now have the chance to choose to cooperate. The girl remains silent, trying to understand why everything reached that point. The next day, the protagonist and Rin are surprised to find Miura waiting for them. The girl is happy to see them, and the protagonist explains the details of the mission. Miura better understands the relationship between the thefts and the increase in prices, but reveals that she came to ask for something. She wants to form a group with them, as she has a mission that will require company for some time. They accept, and the three travel together in a carriage. During the trip, Miura comments that she never imagined being part of a group, since she always acted alone, but admits that she is happy. The destination is an orchard where farmers have been suffering constant thefts. Upon arriving, they are received by three men, including Kasim, who claims to have been responsible for sending the request to the guild. The protagonist feels something strange when shaking his hand, but decides to observe before drawing conclusions. They proceed to the plantations, where the owner explains that that was the site of the last attack. At that moment, Rin senses something approaching and states that they are not human. Prepared, they see a large ogre appear accompanied by several orcs. The protagonist asks Miura to take care of the smaller ones while he faces the larger one. Miura advances with precision, cutting down the smaller monsters, while the protagonist strengthens his body up to level 35 and leaps with crushing force, defeating the ogre with a single blow. The farmers are completely shocked by the power displayed. That night, the protagonist comments to Miura that those monsters are not from the region and that someone must have sent them deliberately, raising suspicions of a planned attack. Miura agrees, but says that they still cannot accuse anyone without proof. She suggests setting up a trap and observing the next moves. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, a girl eliminates several monsters alone, absorbing their energy and concentrating it. On the same night, Gerard decides to release the captured assassin, believing he already knows how to proceed the following day. The next day, the protagonist, his companions, and the workers go out to supervise the orchard. Rin once again senses strange presences and notices recent footprints. Using her magic, she locates three men stealing fruit from the trees. When they try to flee, they draw their swords, but the protagonist and Miura immediately present themselves as adventurers sent by the guild. In a few seconds, the thieves are restrained. The protagonist informs them that they will be handed over to the guards. The men complain, saying that the mage who was helping them had disappeared that day. The workers take the thieves away, while Kasim thanks them for the work. However, when shaking his hand again, the protagonist notices something strange and comments that his hands are far too soft for someone who works in the fields, especially compared to the other farmers, whose hands clearly show the burden of hard labor. The girls explain that, on the previous day, when the monsters appeared, that had been the first time they had seen anything like that. Upon recognizing that they were orcs and ogres, they became even more confused, since it was not common for monsters to appear in that region. Upon hearing all of this, Kasim begins to laugh in a carefree manner, and his innocent expression disappears completely. He then admits the truth, confessing that he was responsible for hiring the thieves who attacked the plantations. That is why he sent the mission to the guild, as he expected they would accept it and come there. Kasim says that this should be seen as a test. Even so, he admits that the protagonist surprised him more than he expected. At that exact moment, the mage appears among them, frightening everyone, and the battle begins. Rin uses her magic while Miura advances with her sword, questioning why Kasim did not attack them while they were unprepared. He calmly responds that he prefers to face his opponents head-on. Rin launches a fireburst, but Kasim manages to block it. Next, Rin changes strategy and uses wind magic, creating a tornado that envelops the enemy. Kasim reacts by using water and earth magic, surprising her with the variety of abilities he demonstrates mastery over. Part of the provocation is also directed at the protagonist. When Kasim asks whether he intends to fight only with his body, without weapons or magic, he laughs shortly afterward and summons a creature beside him, explaining that it is an ice spirit. Kasim states that this will be the protagonist's true opponent. Without hesitation, the protagonist activates the strengthening of his body and throws himself with all his force against the creature. but is shocked when he passes completely through it. As if there were no resistance at all, Kasim mocks him, explaining that spirits do not suffer physical damage, as they exist on a higher level, making any purely bodily attack useless. The protagonist then begins to dodge the attacks of the ice beast, knowing that those blows could severely injure him. Meanwhile, Rin and Miura continue facing the mage, who seems excited upon noticing Miura's growing irritation. She enjoys prolonging the fight, but manages to strike Miura with force and, shortly afterward, lunges toward Rin. Rin raises a magical shield to defend herself, but watches in terror as the blade pierces through her protection. At the same time, the protagonist realizes, in frustration, that his sword also has no effect at all against the ice spirit. Dodging as best he can from the creature's relentless attacks, the protagonist hears Kasim comment that he noticed how he defeated the ogre the previous day with a single blow. He explains that he wanted to see what would happen if the protagonist could not use physical strength, since it was clear that he does not know how to use magic, even though he possesses an incredibly strengthened body. Kasim states that this was only the first phase of the test and then makes a red sphere appear. He hands the object to the ice beast, which absorbs it, changing its coloration to a dark red and drastically increasing its power. The protagonist feels this change immediately when he is struck by a devastating blow. Despite the bodily strengthening, he suffers severe damage and ends up coughing up blood. Kasim then reveals that he does not intend to take his life, as he still needs that power for future plans. He says that the true objective was to lure them there, since Rin would be the perfect hostage. Kasim threatens that, if the protagonist does not obey his orders, everyone will pay a high price for it. Meanwhile, Rin and Miura show signs of exhaustion, but the mage orders them to keep fighting. Even exhausted, the two stand up again, surprising the enemy by revealing that they were still not using all of their power. The mage becomes even more excited, wishing for a serious confrontation. Miura advances first, and while the mage blocks her attack, Rin appears from above using a sword wrapped in lightning. Forced to retreat, the mage dodges, but Miura appears right behind her, delivering a powerful kick that sends her flying through the air. Rin takes advantage of the opening, transforms her staff into a metallic blade, and attacks again. The mage manages to block part of the blow, but the lightning sword pierces through her defense, causing an intense shock. Even so, she begins to laugh, admitting that she did not expect those abilities. Rin then combines wind magic with fire, creating a violent explosion thanks to the particles trapped in the tornado that surrounded the enemy. Still resisting, the mage is struck by Miura, who now wields her sword wrapped in flames, causing significant damage. Faced with this, she finally accepts defeat, stating that she would still defeat them in the future. The girls are stunned upon hearing Kasim, who turns his attention to the protagonist. Severely injured and almost without strength, he orders his beast to crush him even more, preventing him from speaking. While threatening the girls if they try to interfere, the protagonist tries to get up, but his body does not respond. He feels only an intense and bitter pain, realizing that he can do nothing at that moment to fulfill his promise to protect Rin. As his eyes begin to close, he hears a voice asking him if what he desires is power. He answers yes, because he needs to protect Rin and Miura. The voice agrees to grant this, even by breaking rules, but warns that it will be extremely painful and that the effect will not last very long. At that instant, the protagonist rises enveloped in wind magic, releasing an impressive power. Kasim orders the beast to attack, but the protagonist receives the blow and remains standing, as if nothing had happened. Laughing, he counterattacks, launching a tornado that absorbs the ice spirit's fire attack, completely enveloping the creature until it disappears. Kasim is shocked to see his ally defeated. He tries to flee, but the protagonist does not intend to let him escape. A sharp pain makes him fall to his knees, but before losing consciousness, he releases a powerful gust of wind that strikes Kasim head-on. Minutes later, Kasim manages to move away, injured and trying to stop the bleeding from his slashed arm. The mage comments that they underestimated the boy, as he is far stronger than he appears. They already imagined that he possessed superhuman power, but they believe they may still be able to use him to accomplish their objectives when the world awakens again. Later, the protagonist wakes up and notices a small leaf on his bed, which leaves him confused. He does not understand why he is in that place, until the girl asks him to come downstairs to eat when he feels better. Shortly afterward, he devours more than 5 different meals, drawing laughter because of the absurd amount of food. He simply explains that he is very hungry, ending the moment with a lighter atmosphere. The reason he is at home now, after everything that happened, is simple. He completely exhausted his magical strength. Those words sound strange to the protagonist, but Lemma explains that when he was found unconscious in the forest, they decided to take him to the nearest city, where there was a doctor available. The doctor examined him and concluded that he simply needed to rest until he awakened. However, the days passed and he did not wake up. After 3 days without any reaction, everyone became worried and decided to bring him to that place. It was there that he remained all this time, finally managing to wake up only after a week had passed since he lost consciousness. Lemma also says that she wants to know exactly what happened in that forest. The protagonist then tells everything, hiding nothing. Upon hearing the account, Lemma explains that the creature he faced is known as the Crimson Beast, the result of the use of a forbidden curse. This curse allows the user to extract more than 10 times their own magical power. Upon hearing this, everything begins to make sense to the protagonist, including the reason why that battle was so difficult and almost led him to death. He comments that it was at that critical moment that he heard that voice linked to the wind element, something extremely uncommon. The protagonist explains how everything happened, and Lemma agrees that, in light of this, it becomes clear that the enemy is a summoner. Meanwhile, in a distant place, the leader of the organization discovers everything that occurred. He complains about having spent so many resources trying to defeat the protagonist and still having failed. Even so, he states that this is in accordance with the original plan. He tells the mage that she did exactly what she was ordered to do, but while holding her hand, he uses his power to engrave a mark on her skin. The girl is shocked, but he states that, to achieve the final objective, she will need to obey. He explains that he has been modifying everything little by little, as he needs each stage to be ready for the first major step of the plan. At that moment, 2 twins arrive excited, commenting that everything started exactly there. The leader mentions that the festival is about to begin and leaves a leaf in the middle of a large pile of documents on the table. Meanwhile, the protagonist reflects on what Emilia had told him earlier. Summoners possess a special power because, unlike common sorcerers who only form pacts, they are able to see and hear spirits. Furthermore, these spirits release their maximum power through the summoner, temporarily making them more powerful than any other sorcerer. The protagonist then leaves the place in search of the girls. Along the way, he hears 2 men harassing a young woman and decides to intervene. At the exact moment he approaches, the girl breaks free from them and runs over to him. When one of the men tries to attack him, the protagonist easily dodges and pushes him away with a strong kick, causing the 2 to flee. He then asks who she is and how she managed to free herself so easily. The girl simply smiles, saying that he would find out anyway. She introduces herself as Anastasia, and at that instant he feels a sudden impact that leaves him disoriented. Seconds later, she eliminates the remaining enemies. Anastasia explains that she joined the guild precisely to help with the investigation and admits that she had been spying. Together, they advance, defeating several men who were guarding the rooms until they reach a room where the protagonist finds the leaf left earlier. Upon reading its contents, he is completely shocked by the information described there. Meanwhile, Rin and Miura walk through the city. Even while eating, Rin cannot stop thinking about the protagonist. They end up overhearing a discussion about the prices of goods, something that reinforces the need to continue investigating. Suddenly, they are attacked from behind. Rin takes the front line using magic, while Miura supports her. But the enemy is extremely agile and manages to dodge repeatedly. When Rin prepares to cast a more powerful spell, she notices something strange around them. She creates a shield to protect Miura upon noticing sorcerers positioned on the rooftops. Before they can react, the mage appears by surprise and strikes Miura with force, leaving her unconscious. Rin tries to react, but the mage quickly withdraws, saying that she bears no grudge, as she is merely following her boss's orders. Rin then continues fighting the other attackers without giving up. Meanwhile, the protagonist follows the instructions on the leaf, descending through an underground tunnel. What is written there is confirmed. There are hundreds of goblins who have formed the Crimson Pact. Anastasia uses her espionage skills to open a door, but the protagonist notices an extremely unpleasant smell, increasing his concern. Rin manages to defeat the remaining mages, but is devastated at the belief that she has lost Miura. The mage reappears and says that Miura is not far away. She explains that she does not wish to fight, only follows orders, and reveals where Miura is being held. She also says that she hopes Rin can defeat everyone, because only then will she be able to take her revenge. The mage warns that Rin needs to act quickly, because they plan to use the Crimson Pact on Miura. Confused, but determined, Rin flies using her magic, while the mage looks at the mark on her hand, hoping that Rin survives. Shortly afterward, Rin arrives at the place where Miura is under control. When questioning what they intend to do, she discovers that Miura was to be used as a sacrifice. The enemy throws Miura against the wall and tries to immobilize everyone with ice magic, cracking the ground. Rin manages to undo the rune that was weakening Miura and breaks her chains with a cut of wind, holding her friend in her arms. Miura apologizes, believing that her distraction caused all of that, but Rin rejects the apology, relieved to have her back. At that moment, the mage appears once again, praising Rin for having immobilized everyone without causing deaths. She admits that she planned all of that, but states that they will not fight now. There is something far more important about to happen. At least 3,000 monsters are about to attack the city, destroying everything, including the place Rin loves most. It is revealed that the protagonist is in the city, but the mage states that he will not come, as he is busy with another critical situation. Now, all that remains is to see how far they will be able to fight, and what will happen to the city in the face of this imminent attack. While Anna advanced down the corridor, she discreetly activated a hidden rune. In response, a colossal golem emerged from another room, making the ground tremble with its presence. Kasim questions his leader about whether he really intended to sacrifice the entire city, since the attacks would happen both from inside and outside. The leader confirms without hesitation, stating that the creatures below would already be more than enough to deal with the protagonist. After that, the city itself would be completely out of control, exactly as planned. According to him, there was a 90% chance of success, and he did not intend to give up anything. All they needed to do now was wait until dawn, when they would see the fate of that city be fulfilled. The protagonist reacts quickly, protecting Anna from the initial impact and ensuring that he would stay by her side, promising that nothing bad would happen while he was there. Next, he jumps and delivers an extremely powerful blow, breaking part of the golem's defense. With a second, even stronger attack, he completely destroys the creature. However, he finds it strange that the golem does not possess a core. Anna then points to a nearby door. Upon opening it, the protagonist comes face to face with two twins who admit his strength, but say that he did not manage to leave the room in time. Meanwhile, Rin and Miura arrive at the guild and inform the leader about what is happening. The sudden attack on the city surprises everyone, but they soon realize that everything was carefully planned. The thefts of resources were intended to weaken several sectors at the same time. Faced with this, the leader orders all adventurers to gather immediately and for the guards to be notified. The final decision is clear: defend the city at any cost. Rin agrees, satisfied with the leader's fair stance. At that moment, Elima appears, saying that the situation requires immediate action. As she sensed an extremely powerful magical presence approaching, she apologizes for the protagonist not being there, but states that, at least, they still have adventurers capable of helping. The protagonist, still confused, asks what those girls were really doing there. They reveal that they were responsible for the creation of the golem and for the release of the goblins, who were now marching to attack the city. The orders were clear: eliminate children and adults, destroy women, and spread chaos. The protagonist warns that they themselves would also be in danger, but the girls deny it, explaining that they possess a sphere of influence that allows them to control the monsters, ensuring a different life for themselves. By using their power, they begin to awaken the goblins, and the protagonist immediately realizes that these were not ordinary goblins, but versions altered by the Crimson Pact. He decides to keep his distance, determined not to allow them to approach. Activating his magical reinforcement and initiating combat, the goblins shatter against one another, while the twins watch everything, amused, without realizing that one of them was sneaking up from behind. The protagonist knows that he cannot release all of his power, as that would destroy the place and put the surface at risk. Even so, upon hearing the girl's screams, he moves quickly, eliminating several goblins and making it clear that this would be their fate. During the fight, he asks how many monsters still exist. The twins confess that there are many other rooms, each with hundreds of goblins. Realizing that Anna is in danger, the protagonist acts without hesitation, carrying the two girls and ordering everyone to retreat. He asks them to trust him, even without being able to use his full potential, assuring that he would do everything possible to protect them. The twins also begin to use their magic to help. At another point in the city, Rin speaks with the guild leader, who reveals alarming information about the fall of the northern fort. More than 3,000 monsters of all kinds were on the way, including orcs and giant ogres. When gathering adventurers and guards, they realize that they barely reach 200 combatants. Lemma understands the gravity of the situation and proposes using half of her power to eliminate the smaller monsters, leaving the stronger ones to the adventurers and soldiers. Rin then asks permission to carry out her own plan. Hours later, at dawn, Rin takes her position, ready to act. Despite the nervousness, she had never attempted something like this before. Even so, Lemma decides to trust her, remembering that Rin came from a world where knowledge was different and more advanced. Rin explains that she could use fire, water, and earth magic to create a massive explosion, similar to heating a stone inside water until the pressure made it explode. Miura does not fully understand, but trusts her, just like Lemma. When the monsters approach, Rin releases her power, creating a huge hole in the ground into which the creatures fall. Next, a gigantic amount of water begins to fill the place. To finish, she creates an incandescent sphere of metal in the sky. As it falls onto the evaporating water, the pressure increases drastically, causing the metal to be launched at high speed like a devastating explosion, eliminating hundreds of smaller monsters. Lemma quickly supports Rin, who becomes extremely weakened, but still conscious. He encourages her, saying that she is fighting for what she believes in. Gerard then gives the order for everyone to advance. The battle spreads throughout the city as adventurers and guards face the remaining monsters. From a distance, Kasim and his ally observe everything, impressed by Rin's power. They comment that, despite the chaos, the real fun was yet to come and hope that everyone survives until that moment. After hours of combat, Rin and Miura are exhausted, but Lemma asks them to endure, as the battle is not over yet. At that moment, they feel an even more powerful presence approaching. Gerard is informed about the emergence of extremely resilient and dangerous crimson monsters, without knowing exactly how to face them. The atmosphere of tension increases. It is then that the protagonist appears, greeting everyone and apologizing for arriving late. He smiles when he sees the number of crimson monsters ahead and wonders how many sacrifices were required to create them. Something much greater was about to happen. These crimson pacts, although now also being used against merchants and monsters, were showing all of their true power. With that, they begin to eliminate any creature that appears in their path. However, they quickly realize that they cannot advance much due to the absurd number of enemies. Faced with this, the protagonist asks Rin and Miura to grant him 30 seconds. He states that he would use an extremely powerful spell to balance the battle a little. The girls agree and continue fighting using what little energy they have left, while the seed concentrates deeply, initiating the invocation of its most devastating magic. Meanwhile, the protagonist explains everything that had happened to Gerard, including how he met the twins, revealing that they were earth mages. Gerard still tries to ask about Rin, but is interrupted the instant a gigantic explosion echoes across the battlefield. The impact is so intense that even the twins feel the shock of that power. At that moment, everyone perceives an extremely strong magical presence, and Gerard has no more doubts. All of that was the result of the power of the seed. A few seconds later, Rin and Miura observe the destruction around them. The scenery is completely devastated, although 3 enemy generals are still standing. Even so, the two become encouraged when they realize that now only 3 adversaries remain. Lemma feels pride in the posture of her apprentices and decides to fight with all the strength she still possesses. Rin gathers what remains of her energy and fires a powerful lightning bolt, believing it would be enough. However, she falls to her knees immediately afterward, exhausted, realizing that the attack did not even scratch the enemy. The other girls scream desperately, but Rin accepts her fate in silence, watching her life pass before her eyes. She thinks about how she had always known that this moment would come. Even if they had managed to advance, she was certain that the protagonist would protect the world, even if it cost him his own life. It was something very important that she wanted to have said to him personally, and she regrets not having done so before. At that exact moment, a familiar voice responds, asking what she was thinking of doing now. Rin is completely shocked when she sees the protagonist appear before her. He smiles, offering words of encouragement, and apologizes for having taken so long. Miura runs to Rin, relieved to realize that she was not seriously injured. Meanwhile, the protagonist releases even more power into his body and advances against the monster, managing to push it back. The creature reacts, grabbing him by the leg and violently throwing him against the ground. Even so, the protagonist leaps again and delivers a devastating blow, ending the confrontation in an impressive manner. The girls are stunned and ask how much his power had increased. He replies that he needed to reach level 100 in order to deal real damage to those monsters. He also explains that he was delayed because he had been fighting several goblins, but now he was there to help them. He asks if they can still fight, as he would need someone to protect him. Lemma agrees, still confused when seeing the twins, but the protagonist explains that they are earth mages who ended up helping in the battle. Rin, almost without strength, stands up and encourages him, saying that she trusts him. From a distance, Mist and her allies observe everything attentively. Mist is impressed by how much the protagonist had achieved, as he managed to exterminate the goblins and still fight at that level. Even so, they know that it is only a matter of time before their leader makes the final decision. Everyone there was merely a pawn, forced to follow the orders that were given to them. Gerard is informed about the critical situation on the battlefield and understands that the boom heard earlier was caused by the power of the seed, which eliminated a large number of enemies. However, now Teichai is facing 3 crimson ogres alone, and Gerard fears that he will not be able to hold out for long, as he is clearly at a disadvantage compared to Anna's power. Upon hearing this, he cannot hide his concern, remembering the words the protagonist told him before leaving, promising to return safely. Some adventurers thank him for having appeared at that moment to save them. Anna, now more motivated than ever, feels that she has been given a new chance by the protagonist and decides to take advantage of it to help as much as possible. Suddenly, someone bumps into her and whispers something in her ear. The shock is immediate. Unable to control her own body, she leaves the camp in silence. Meanwhile, the adventurers continue fighting with everything they have, using skills and spells to eliminate the remaining monsters. Even the protagonist's companions cast fire and earth magic, creating a powerful synergy that makes them feel almost unstoppable. Even so, Lemma constantly reminds them to conserve energy, as the main objective was to protect the protagonist and prevent him from pushing himself beyond his limit. The protagonist manages to knock down more ogres, slamming them to the ground and finishing one of them with a powerful blow. Even so, he is worried, because these monsters force him to maintain his enhancement at level 100, which consumes energy in an absurd way. Suddenly, the ground begins to tremble violently. Something gigantic moves beneath the earth and, in a terrifying instant, devours the remaining ogres. The adventurers are left without understanding what is happening. The earth continues to shake as the seed cannot believe what it is seeing. Then, before everyone, a colossal 2-headed dragon emerges from the ground, causing absolute shock. The protagonist and the enemies observe with satisfaction. The main piece had finally arrived. It was the moment to see what the hero from another world was truly capable of. Someone whose power sprang directly from his very essence. Even though confused, the protagonist understands that this was not normal. Dragons do not leave their nests for battles so small. Still, he knows that he has no choice. That fight would serve to buy time, allowing everyone to evacuate. He asks the girls to retreat and orders the others to return to the city, in case they need to abandon it later. Rin questions whether they really should leave, saying that she would stay by his side, reminding him of the promise they made to remain together until they return to their world. Miura and Lemma agree to stay nearby. The protagonist then explains that this time he would fight with everything he had, even if that meant walking toward death. For that reason, he insists that they move away. He advances until he is face to face with the dragon. He tries to communicate, but receives no response, understanding that only force would resolve it. He leaps and attacks, but his blows have no effect at all. With a single movement of its tail, the dragon hurls him against the ground, causing severe injuries. Rin tries to help him, but a magical attack from the dragon prevents her from interfering. Even injured, the protagonist tries to get up, understanding that that creature was far too powerful to be defeated easily. He realizes that the dragon was holding back, which explains why he was still alive. At that moment, he hears Anna's voice and cannot understand what she was doing there. The girl had just awakened at that instant. The protagonist is confused and surprised to see her there, gravely injured, while she herself does not understand what she is doing in that place. He tries to ask her to leave as quickly as possible, but the dragon, at that moment, releases a powerful magical attack. The energy unleashed pierces through everything and strikes Anna directly, making her receive the full impact. The protagonist, overtaken by despair, runs to her and holds her in his arms, realizing how badly injured her body was. Even so, Anna can only say that she is sorry for having been a burden to him and that she would have loved to be able to be his friend. Trying to cheer her up, the protagonist says that he will take her to a doctor immediately. But Anna only replies that he is very kind. Then, she closes her eyes, and thus, she loses her life. The protagonist screams in pain upon realizing that he has lost her. Remembering the promise he had made that he would not allow anything to happen to her, he feels guilty because he believed that, with his power, he could protect her. Now, he understands that it was not enough. Consumed by rage and pain, he orders Ariel to grant him power, stating that whoever has need must have enough. At that moment, Ariel responds by saying that this was exactly what they needed. The protagonist is then taken to another plane, leaving everything behind. Surprised, he questions why Ariel did not help him before, but she apologizes, crying, explaining that she could not act unless certain conditions were met. Spirits can only act when the summoner gives the order, and 2 additional requirements must be fulfilled to form the pact. The summoner must consciously desire the power and be willing to receive everything that it carries. She explains that, previously, he was not prepared. Only when he felt that he was about to lose someone important did the true desire emerge. Even so, Ariel apologizes, but the protagonist replies that the fault is not hers, but his own. He admits that he had always been afraid of that power, because he felt that using it would be like cheating, even coming to feel like a god. Deep down, he knew that he was still not ready to receive it. Now, however, he finally understands. He desires all that power to protect everyone in this world. Upon hearing this, Ariel gladly accepts, giving him everything she possesses, telling him, "I love you." Then, the protagonist returns to the battlefield. Rin, confused, asks who that girl was, but the protagonist only asks her to stay by his side, saying that Anna was a friend. His body then lights up with a newly acquired power, and he declares that he is now a summoner. As he advances, he states that they will win with a single attack. Before that, he questions the dragon about the reason for interfering in a war between humans. The dragon responds that, if he could demonstrate his true power and withstand a full attack, it would tell him everything it knows. Then, the creature takes flight and fires a combined attack with its 2 heads. The protagonist responds by summoning a powerful wind tornado, using aerial power. At first, the clash seems balanced, but the protagonist surpasses his own limits. His attack pierces through the dragon's spell, violently slamming it against the ground. Impressed, the dragon acknowledges that power and decides to explain that it intervened at the request of a specific person. It states that the objective had already been achieved and that, upon seeing that power, it understands that they are on the right path. It also says that that person would be the one to guide the protagonist to become strong enough to protect an entire nation, leaving him confused before departing. Hours later, Lu leaves the place and reports the events to a woman, showing satisfaction at knowing that the protagonist formed a pact with a spirit. She states that now she knows exactly how to guide him so that he becomes even stronger. As the days pass, the city begins to slowly recover from the monster attack. Merchants resume their activities and help with the reconstruction. The protagonist visits Anna's grave, hoping that one day they may meet again. Later, he goes to Amila's house, where he finds the girls and decides to show that he can now summon his spirit. The demonstration surprises everyone because he not only evolved greatly, but also manages to make the spirit visible. However, the conversation is interrupted by the sudden arrival of a royal carriage. Shortly after, they meet Alina, who introduces herself as the daughter of a great noble and messenger of King Gilmer. During dinner, she informs them that the king desires their presence in the royal capital. A few hours later, everyone departs in the carriage. During the journey, the protagonist takes the opportunity to rest, until he is awakened by one of the girls. Amila explains that they need to talk about the reason for the king's summons. She begins to explain that the kingdom is divided between two powers, that of King Gilmer and that of his brother, the Duke. Although they had maintained peace for more than 30 years, in recent months the conflicts had intensified. The king decided to send mages outside the kingdom, both to expand knowledge and to demonstrate power to other nations. For the Duke, this was seen as a threat, as it would reveal strategic information to enemies. Since then, conflicts have grown, generating protests and rumors of rebellion. These rumors of war are the main reason why the king summoned the protagonist. Minutes later, they arrive at the royal city. The protagonist realizes that the place is strange and far too silent, almost ghostly. When they try to move forward, an arrow is fired at the carriage, but he manages to block it quickly, observing the surroundings in search of the attacker. After some time, an archer appears and confirms their suspicions. Everything they had been told was true. Shortly afterward, they enter a great hall, where everyone watches them with distrust. Then, the king enters and thanks them for their presence. Lemma, confident, takes the word first and directly asks the king what his true intentions are. Gilmer orders all the nobles and advisors to leave the room. As soon as they are alone, the king addresses the seed and states that nothing has changed since then. The mage replies that they have already explained the entire situation and that he is aware of everything. The reason for the summons is directly linked to the conflict with his brother, something the king understands very well. He then makes clear what he truly desires from them. They state that they would accept helping, but impose some conditions. The king agrees to what is proposed, before withdrawing to rest. Lemma asks one more question, asking the king to confirm whether it was he who performed the summoning. Gilmer shows surprise that they discovered it, but confirms that he was responsible. This answer awakens a negative feeling in the protagonist, who questions the fact that they lost their lives in their original world to be brought there and now are forced to fight against other people. The king understands his pain and apologizes, taking full responsibility for his actions. Shortly after, Rin comments to the others that she spoke directly with the king. While they were talking about this, they receive an unexpected visit. Princess Charlotte enters the room, greets everyone, and immediately reveals that it was she who performed the summoning. She explains that she has the ability to manipulate time and space magic, and that she did it following her father's orders. Charlotte says that the spell had been carefully studied to bring someone suited to the kingdom's needs. However, during the preparation process, wines were sent as part of the ceremony and ended up coming from territory controlled by the king's brother. This left her with no choice, forcing her to complete the summoning. Her initial objective was only to present the protagonist, but everything ended up getting out of control. Upon hearing this, the protagonist understands the situation and asks when they could return to their world. Crying, Charlotte apologizes and explains that she can only use the summoning spell once in her lifetime. She begs for forgiveness and promises that, when the war ends, she will find a way to send them back. Rin then calms the princess, saying that they trust her. Despite all the dangers, they learned a lot in that world and became stronger. Together, they would find a way back when everything was over. Shortly after, Lemma calls the protagonist and asks him to accompany her. Next, he finds himself at the center of a combat arena, under the observation of the king and several nobles. On the other side of the arena appears Sumaya, the captain of the royal army, who warns them that that fight would be to the death. The protagonist begins to block the attacks instinctively, without understanding the reason for that. Meanwhile, Lemma explains to the other girls that that fight was proposed because many nobles and members of the army see them only as foreign soldiers. To change that view, they needed to demonstrate their true power, and the best way was by winning that battle. The protagonist manages to defend himself, realizing the impressive strength of the captain. When she tries to invoke the desert, he understands that he could seriously injure her and decides to reinforce his own body, applying such force that both swords end up breaking. Sumaya becomes even more excited and starts fighting hand to hand. The scene surprises the nobles and the king himself, as no one had ever faced the captain at that level. Even she herself realizes how much the protagonist had evolved. He manages to immobilize her with a hold and throws her to the ground, striking the sand forcefully beside her face. Faced with this, Sumaya accepts defeat and apologizes for having challenged him. The protagonist replies that he understands, because that was the most logical thing to do. Soon after, he approaches and subdues her again, asking whether she would not like to accept him as a husband. Sumaya, without hesitation, states that she would even accept being his concubine, as she had always sought a strong man like him and had now found one. Embarrassed, the protagonist shouts that he cannot deal with that night. Later, alone on the rooftop, he decides to invoke the desert. He confesses that he feels very afraid of his own power, because he knows that he could injure any human being easily. He fears hurting other people. Shortly afterward, Sumaya informs the king that the enemy troops number around 1,000 soldiers. Gilmer understands that war is inevitable and orders the troops to be prepared, including the mages, who must remain on alert. Although the princess is insecure, she understands that this is necessary. The king also asks that the two summoned be informed. Charlotte meets with the strategists to explain the situation. Lemma finds it strange that the enemy would attack with so few men and requests that all mages be prepared in case they are needed. Rin does not understand anything about strategy or military plans, but Miura understands the situation better. The group decides to follow the Seed's orders. Even so, the protagonist realizes that this battle would be different from the previous ones, because now they would fight against people, not monsters. He knows that, if they use their powers to the fullest, they will take human lives. Lemma responds that this is the price of war and of defending what is important. He asks the protagonist to focus only on fighting, as they always have, because that way they would succeed. Even so, the protagonist cannot drive away guilt and concern. That night, the protagonist accompanies Rin to her quarters. She says that they should sleep early to wake up early the next day. He thanks her, but realizes that she wants to say something more. Then he invites her to come in, saying that the room is large and that he does not want her to feel alone. A bit of company would be good before they sleep. Rin lies down and confesses that she feels something similar to what she felt before an important event in her other world. However, now it is different, because human lives are at risk. Despite everything, she cares deeply about the people of that world and would not like anything bad to happen to them. He had died, but our protagonist replies that it was not necessary for her to go to war, because she should remember what the princess had said, that all of that was her fault. It was because of that she ended up coming to this world, and for exactly that reason he would take care of absolutely everything alone. However, Rin reminds him that he had already tried to push her away before, something she did not accept, even going so far as to throw herself toward him. She makes it clear that she also does not intend to let him face everything alone. She explains that she would remain by his side during the war. Our protagonist thanks her for that and promises that, if that were the case, he would protect her with everything within his reach, not allowing anything bad to happen to her. Even so, at that moment, he feels something strange and asks Rin to rest a bit. Meanwhile, in another place, Miura was talking with Lemma. commenting that she did not know exactly what those children might be thinking. Lemma, however, felt a presence nearby and said that what truly worried her was something else. At that same moment, a spy in the service of Marchais arrives at the castle and manages to infiltrate Rin's room. He strikes a blow against a pillow, while our protagonist appears through another door accompanied by his companions, saying that he had felt that presence. Even so, the spy does not care about anything and lunges forward, managing to cut a small strand of hair. Upon seeing this, our protagonist is taken by an uncontrollable fury and begins to assault the spy, because the one thing that worried him most in that world was failing once again to fulfill a promise. For that reason, he would not allow anything to happen to his friend Rin. Lemma stops him, saying that he was going too far. At that instant, the man suddenly gets up and runs toward the balcony, leaping from there without hesitation. Thus, the protagonist and the girls realize that he preferred to die rather than reveal anything about his true intentions. The next day, the entire city was prepared, watching the enemy army approach. The moment had arrived, and Lemma asks our protagonist to begin the battle. He accepts and goes to the front of the wall, invoking Ariel and asking it to cast the spell. Then, a powerful explosion of magic strikes the ground in front of the enemies, creating an enormous crater. Lemma is satisfied, because this would force the enemy to go around the area, making them an easy target. Nilgan, irritated, orders the attack and tells his soldiers not to be intimidated. He commands them to prepare their spells, while our protagonist talks with the girls, who find it strange that the enemy is not carrying proper equipment for battle. Shortly afterward, several flashes of light appear, and in seconds countless spells strike the squadrons, coming from different magical elements. Sumaya cannot believe what she sees, because that would require at least 1,000 elite mages, something practically impossible. The protagonist then uses his special vision and notices rings on the enemies. Even from a great distance, he explains that they must be magic stones, capable of allowing even a beginner to cast basic spells. The problem is that these items consume the vitality of whoever uses them, causing them to be left without vital energy in just a few minutes. Since none of those soldiers seemed to truly understand what they were doing, Sumaya is outraged, saying that that was not honorable. One thing was a soldier dying in combat. Another completely different thing was allowing them to die in that way. She demands that they do something to stop it. Rin agrees, and Lemma says that she already has a plan, but needs her help. Rin replies that she is willing to cooperate in whatever is possible. Lemma asks her to cast a spell, and while Rin prepares herself, the enemies continue attacking. Our protagonist invokes a shield to protect them, while Miura dedicates herself to destroying the spells that approach. After some time, Rin manages to cast her spell into the sky, causing a heavy rain to fall over the enemies, creating a great deal of mud beneath their feet. Soon after, thunder echoes through the sky, and a powerful lightning bolt strikes the battlefield, leaving the men paralyzed on the ground. Nilgan becomes furious, not understanding what had happened. At that moment, Inimmix, one of the nobles who had provided the magic stones, appears and explains the situation. With that, the battle comes to an end, and he declares that he had already fulfilled his role, accepting that as his final destiny. A few hours later, the royal family's army keeps all the enemies captured. Sumaya encourages everyone, saying that they should celebrate the victory that night. Despite this, our protagonist barely drinks anything, bothered by certain comments about him. He comments to his partner that this would not last, showing a device that would put an end to that organization the following day. Later, Miura and Lemma inform the protagonist and Rin that the king was calling them to the hall. Some whisper about the mage who opened the earth, but the king sincerely thanks everyone for the victory and says that he wishes to reward them. He presents a catalog with the best weapons and artifacts of the royal family, allowing them to choose one item each. Everyone is impressed. Miura chooses a mithril dagger, Rin takes interest in an elegant staff, and Lemma opts for a very peculiar ring. Our protagonist, in turn, analyzes a sword similar to a katana, something extremely uncommon in that world. Each of them accepts their gift in the king's name. After that, they head to the combat arena, where Sumaya was already waiting for the protagonist, wanting him to test his sword against his future wife. The other girls were also excited to try out their new weapons, and Lemma even tries to use her magical ring first. However, the protagonist begins to feel unwell because of what he had eaten the day before and ends up leaving the place to look for some medicine. He takes advantage of that moment to talk with Ariel and, for an instant, both of them have the sensation that they are being watched. However, upon hearing the comments around him, he realizes that it was nothing like that. People were simply staring at him, visibly impressed by the power he had demonstrated in the battle. Soon after, several children begin to approach trying to greet him, and our protagonist ends up surrounded by them. After some time, he finally manages to free himself, still surprised by how much he was being recognized. At that moment, he feels a different presence and orders the person to appear. That is when Kim emerges. The protagonist is shocked to see him without one of his arms, but the boy recalls that, in their last fight, it was precisely when the protagonist lost his arm. He replies that he did not remember that clearly. Kim, quite agitated, says that he intends to destroy him, to which the protagonist replies that if he wants to fight, he should do so in another place and at another time, without putting innocence at risk. Kasim merely mocks that attitude. The hero then stares at him and says that he should act quickly, because he needed to pay for everything he had already done. Kasim reveals that everything was already prepared, and that, if the protagonist refused, his allies had poisoned all the wells in the city. Now, it would be up to him to decide whether he would obey the orders or let countless innocent people die. The protagonist knows that this would mean the death of many and cannot allow that to happen, so he ends up accepting the confrontation. Meanwhile, the girls continued training, and Lemma asked Sumaya if she had participated in that tournament to calm the soldiers' nerves. The captain confirms and explains that it served to gather a larger army, because the next attack would be much more powerful. She asks that the soldiers enjoy a bit of tranquility before the difficult days that were to come. The protagonist moves forward, with Kim accompanying him. Kim states that he will finally be able to defeat him and leads him to an isolated location, where he says that they would fight under equal conditions, with the same level of power. He reveals that he possesses a device capable of limiting the protagonist's abilities, placing both of them on the same level. Thus, according to him, it would be clear who truly was the best, regardless of the strength accumulated over the years. Ariel is bothered by that, because Kim's words sounded as if the protagonist had not made any effort to reach where he was. She asks him not to accept, saying that she feels a very strange energy coming from that device. Even so, the protagonist understands that there was only one way to put an end to that: to fight, accept the challenge, and go all the way. Kasim smiles, satisfied, and places the device between the two, murmuring words of thanks to his lord for that opportunity. At that very instant, a dark energy runs through the protagonist's body, and he immediately feels his powers being restricted. Kasim states that that was the end, and that that limitation would be his revenge for what he had suffered. The protagonist, however, only wishes that everything would end once and for all. The fight begins, and both of them start exchanging blows and spells, using weapons and varied abilities. Even limited, the protagonist manages to endure for some time. Kasim refuses to surrender and continues attacking, using close combat and magic at the same time, while a figure watches everything from a distance, hidden. After several minutes, both are already extremely tired and injured. Kasim bleeds, but says that he is impressed by the opponent's endurance. He declares that that would be the final blow. The protagonist responds that, if that is the case, it is enough to block and win. However, deep down, he knows that he does not have enough strength and needs to do something at that moment. He remembers what Rin had explained about magic. It was enough to clearly imagine what he desired. Concentrating, he creates a powerful wind slash in the shape of a katana, which pierces Kasim's spell and hurls him forcefully against one of the walls. The protagonist states that he won, and Kasim accepts the defeat. Even so, the protagonist comments that he had an advantage for still having both arms, but Kasim replies that this is no excuse because he lost due to lack of preparation. In the end, he admits that he could not defeat him and says that now the device should be destroyed so that the power would be restored. At that moment, Ariel warns the protagonist, who feels a strange energy arise. A shadow begins to emerge from the artifact, taking on a threatening form. Worried, the protagonist tries to attack it, but realizes that he is too weak to cause any damage. Before he can be struck, Grami intervenes and manages to protect him. Kasim is surprised to see her and says that the artifact needs to be destroyed. The girl in red attacks with her sword, trying to put an end to it, but the monster remains. Kasim begins to realize that his leader had lied about everything. The protagonist understands that he needs to act quickly and asks Ariel to compress the air around the creature, and then channel an electric shock into his sword. With a strong thrust, he launches the attack at the monster, which disappears without leaving any traces. With that, all of the protagonist's power is instantly released, and he feels immense relief at returning to normal. He tries to offer a recovery potion to Kasim, but Grami stops him, saying that it is not necessary. Kasim is remorseful, for he lost, and his pride was hurt when he realized that, even with the same level of power, he could not prove that he was superior. The protagonist says that true strength comes from effort and training, recalling that his master was always extremely strict. In the end, the observer decides to take Kasim away. Before leaving, Kasim says that the protagonist had a great teacher, and that he should be proud of that. The protagonist is satisfied, because it was the first time he had seen Kasim truly smile. At that moment, bells begin to ring, alerting everyone. People hide and run to their homes, saying that this marked the beginning of the war, and that they needed to prepare. At night, M meets with her leader and explains everything that happened in the duel, including the protagonist's surprising power, something that deeply impresses the woman. Even so, Mist asks permission to continue with Plan Y, in order to guide him to the next step, and she accepts without hesitation. The next day, at the mansion of Dort Marche, he asks for authorization to personally deal with the mages and the sorceress of the Fallen Leaves, promising that he would not make the mistakes of the past and that he would deliver the leader of those mages. Hours later, Dort gives orders for his soldiers to begin the battle, while he talks with his counselor and right-hand man about whether that truly was the best decision. Animecaps, in turn, states with conviction that it is. He believes that he is doing what is best for the kingdom and fighting to achieve victory in the name of his people. Even so, he maintains an ironic smile on his face, for the Duke is unaware of the true plans that are underway. At the same time, King Gilmer encourages his army, reminding them that his own brother dared to challenge the royalty. Therefore, they need to prove their honor and loyalty, ensuring the safety of the kingdom. Having said that, the king gives the order, and the soldiers advance, beginning a harsh war filled with sacrifices. In this scenario, Rin, Miura, and Lemma also spring into action, determined to contribute with everything they have to help defeat the enemy as quickly as possible. The protagonist finds all of this ironic, because not long ago he was just a high school student. Now, however, he is there, in the center of a battlefield, carrying a mission that was entrusted to him. He asks Ariel to advance, and the girl even reaches the enemy camp. Agreeing with the plan, the protagonist performs an impressive leap, reaching the opposing territory and surprising everyone around. He states that that power must be used strategically, like a trap. Meanwhile, the lady was talking with the enemy leader, explaining that the war had already begun. The girl shows enthusiasm and eagerly awaits the result, curious to find out how the plan would unfold and which path would be chosen with the energy they had received. Hours pass and the war continues intensely. The girls use all of their abilities in combat, while some soldiers end up surrounded. Many flee upon seeing the arrival of an extremely powerful warrior. Before Rin appears her opponent, Sora, tasked with eliminating her as soon as she found her. Rin realizes that she is strong, but is not intimidated by her appearance, for she knows that she also possesses great strength. Thus, she prepares to face her. Sora, in turn, seems satisfied, as she believes that that confrontation will be fun. Meanwhile, Miura fights with everything she has. Marchise provokes her, saying that a woman like her should not be on the battlefield. Miura responds firmly, stating that she can be stronger than any expectation placed on a man, and that she would prove it right there. Lemma, on the other hand, manages to capture a large group of soldiers using a spell, but states that she does not intend to kill them. as they are also citizens of the kingdom. However, when she tries to use another spell, her magic is nullified and the vacuum dissipates, leaving her paralyzed for an instant. A hooded mage appears and explains that obstructive magic is necessary to face someone of her level. He also warns that the mage of Ladra himself would take his own life if necessary. Lemma loses control of the spell and orders the soldiers to flee if they wish to remain alive. To Ladra, this seems unnecessary, as she considers that Lemma shows excessive compassion toward the enemies. She replies that it is not like that, because the protagonist still needs to contain that situation. Meanwhile, the protagonist manages to reach the location where Duke Dort and his counselors are. Everyone goes on alert upon seeing him, not understanding how he arrived there. He explains that he simply flew to the place thanks to the spirit he summoned. Surprised, the Duke orders the guards to step back so that he can speak with the boy alone. When they are alone, he asks the reason for his presence. The protagonist replies that he came as a mediator of peace, stating that the king wishes to end the war as soon as possible. He proposes that if the troops are withdrawn, he will spare the lives of the Duke and the other nobles. He also says that both of them want what is best for the kingdom, but that this war only makes the people suffer, weakening the country in an unnecessary conflict. While he tries to convince the Duke, Animecaps begins to release a dark power that spreads through the place, advancing until it reaches those who had already fallen in battle. On the other side, Lemma had been fighting for several minutes against Ladra and is impressed by the mage's power. Even so, she understands his tactics, and when he attacks with magic, she counterattacks so quickly that he cannot react, receiving a deep cut to the chest. The mage is in shock, for he knows that his level is far below Lemma's. She asks if he has any last words before dying, but he refuses to say anything. Then, Lemma evokes an infernal sphere of fire, surprising herself with her own power. Since she had never reached that level before, she had always known that, from the beginning, it would be impossible for him to defeat Miura. Marchais notices the explosion from several meters away and understands that Lemma was responsible. He laments that the mage he hired did not fulfill what was promised, although he did not expect much more from a mere adventurer. Upon hearing this, Miura becomes furious. Marchais's attitude pushes her to the limit, and she begins to envelop her sword in flames, warning that she would defeat him with a single strike. Marchais advances toward her, and the two engage in a direct clash of swords. For an instant, he manages to disarm Miura, but he is immediately surprised when he no longer sees her in front of him. In the very next second, she appears behind him, and, with a single precise slash, ends the fight, exactly as she had promised. Meanwhile, the protagonist asks Dort what he thinks about peace. The Duke rejects any possibility of surrender. The protagonist does not understand this refusal and asks why. Dort replies that if he has so much power, he could simply destroy an entire nation. The protagonist reflects for a moment and answers that he would not. Something like that would require immense responsibility and is not something that interests him. Moreover, he does not want to become a tyrant hated by all, for he does not fight to cause suffering to others. Those present laugh upon hearing this, as if such words did not belong to that world. Even so, he explains that if he were on their side, he would think differently, because in that world people are born and die, especially warriors, who must be willing to give their own lives. Even so, the protagonist values the lives of the innocent and does not want to give up on them. At that moment, Ariel appears in alarm and warns the protagonist that something is wrong. Animecaps merely laughs, for the spirit had already noticed, but now it was far too late. He releases all of his dark power, and those who had fallen in battle begin to rise. Rin, in turn, is exhausted after fighting for so long, but knows she must keep going. Even wounded and tired, she understands that she must defeat her opponent and cannot give up. Gathering her remaining strength, she leaps once more and unleashes a powerful fire spell. The attack surprises her enemy, who is gravely injured, covered in severe burns. Even so, the duel is not over, and both know they must continue fighting until the end. At that exact moment, some soldiers attempt to intervene, advancing to attack, but time does not grant them that chance. Rin warns her opponent and, somewhat surprised, notices that something strange is already happening to those soldiers. An unusual aura emanates from them, and when the two clash their swords, they understand that those warriors no longer distinguish between allies and enemies. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, someone asks their advisor what exactly that man is plotting. The answer comes coldly. He was never allied with anyone. He merely used existing resentment to trigger the war, something that proved extremely useful to him. Above all, that scenario fascinated him enough to allow him to cast the spell. But none of it was done of his own will. He merely obeyed the order of someone superior, someone who sees absolutely everything. At that moment, the protagonist remembers the dragon's words and assumes it is the same entity. Meanwhile, Animecaps begins to completely lose his sanity as the dark power intensifies and overtakes his mind. This force continues to grow, transforming all those who fell in battle into berserker soldiers, driven solely by bloodlust. For them, neither the kingdom nor the fate of the world matters, spreading immense fear across the battlefield. The fighters watch in horror as these soldiers rise again despite severe injuries. Lemma notices a rune floating in the air and, sensing the magical presence, comments that the energy feels familiar. The air spirit confirms her suspicion and mentions that it resembles a bloody rhapsody. With no other choice, they begin fighting against the cursed soldiers. The protagonist sees Animecaps conversing with someone invisible, offering his soul and body in exchange for that power. Dominated by it, his body begins to transform. Miura is informed that something similar occurred 200 years ago during a great war, when a powerful black magic took control of the fallen in battle, turning them into uncontrollable soldiers who devastated the entire kingdom. However, Rin and her opponent notice that the soldiers continue to rise regardless of the attacks used. In the distance, a massive tornado forms, indicating that the protagonist is trying to contain the situation. Ariel is alerted, but Dort understands that the tragedy will repeat itself if nothing is done. It becomes clear that Animecaps could not have cast that magic alone, meaning that someone is using him to provoke a war and corner the protagonist. Dort's greatest fear is that his brother will order a total assault, accelerating the destruction of the kingdom. The protagonist decides to act, remembering his promise to Rin and accepting that sacrifices will be inevitable. As he concentrates his power, time seems to stop, and Era bids him farewell, offering him the chance to accept her completely. He accepts this power and, upon returning to the present, warns Rin that he will soon cease to be human. He then summons Sylphie, the fairy queen, whose power purifies the rune of darkness, dispels the black magic, and returns the soldiers to their normal state. Recognized as a true summoner, the protagonist states that he will explain everything later, for the war is not yet over. Animecaps reappears transformed into a black dragon, and reveals that everything was part of the plan of an entity that observes even other worlds and wishes to turn the protagonist into the ultimate weapon of that world. Outraged at being treated as a tool, the protagonist faces Animecaps with fury, determined to use his power only to protect those he loves. After a devastating battle, he defeats the dragon with a powerful lightning strike. Animecaps, satisfied, states that he has finally fulfilled his objective before dying. The protagonist awakens in the palace, where he learns that the war has ended and the city has begun to rebuild. The king rewards them with riches and appoints them as advisors to the army. Not everyone meets a happy fate. The king's brother is imprisoned, while Dort remains firm in his convictions. The protagonist reflects that power brings responsibility and that his humanity must not be lost. After returning to their city, the group encounters the festival under the stars, even knowing that greater forces still watch his every step.